Okay, if we can get started, we're ready for the next session to begin. This is Rob Miller. He is the lead scouting and strategy for the Innovators Robotics. I won't go into how we actually first started off. Maybe he can add that into his little presentation of just sitting up in the stands and going, yeah, that looks like a pretty robot, that's doing stuff, to eventually where we got to here, to paper, to here. But I'll let him start. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, so as they say on the airlines, if this is the scouting presentation, if this is not what you're intending, now's your opportunity to leave. Talking about scouting, it goes hand in hand with strategy, so this really should be scouting and strategy. I just followed the bill of what scouting, so we're going to actually talk quite a bit about strategy as well. As John said, my name is Rob Miller. I'm the mentor for strategy and scouting for the Innovators Robotics. By the way, my real job also is analytics business consultant. I live and breathe this stuff. Interestingly enough, I was a mentor before I was an analytics business consultant. In my job interview, they asked me if I had had any background. I said, yeah, I do analytics for fun with a robot team, and they wanted to hear all about that. So I ended up landing the job because of robotics. Imagine that. As a matter of fact, we also have another student that was one of our programmers for the system several years ago that now works at McDonald's in their analytics department. So he got the analytics bug as well and landed a job there as well. I will flash my email up again at the end. Please contact me for anything, any questions that you might have about anything that we're talking about from a scouting standpoint. Apologize. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of our agenda. We're going to talk about why teams scout, what the purpose of scouting is. Second thing is how to scout. When should you scout? What should you scout? We also have a little discussion about scouting methodology. How should you even physically do the scouting? And then the last thing is I want to talk about the Innovators Robotics FIRES scouting system, which at this point, last year we had 13 teams over 9 different events, a lot of events that we weren't even at. And over the course of the season, our system scouted over 300 unique teams. It was kind of interesting going to Ohio State Championships. We already had data on all the teams before we even went, and there was a lot of teams that we hadn't even gone to competitions. So I always tell people that's sort of my master game plan here is have everybody scout. Now I have all the data, right? But all the data is also available to everybody else that uses our system. So why do teams scout? So who can tell me the number one reason teams scout?
Pick list.
That's a good number 2. I can tell you we were one of those teams because everybody else does it, we think we should do it. We had no idea why we needed to scout, but everybody else seems to be doing it, we should do it. So our first competition, we showed up and everyone was scouting, said, what are they doing? Oh, they're keeping track. So we started writing stuff down on pieces of paper, and by the end of the competition, we had this big pile of paper. Okay, now what do we do with this? We had no idea. So at least the second year, we got a little smarter and said, okay, we'll create a form because that seems like the right thing to do. And we'll even key it into a spreadsheet because that's even cooler. And then what do we do with it? We had no idea. Well, maybe we could sort all this data. It's amazing what people do, the level of effort that people go through to scout, and they don't ever use any of the data. It also ends up getting kind of a bad rap because it's like that thing that you don't have any other job, you're going to be a scouter. And the scouters are like, oh, this is going to be fun. So it really, there's this whole negative connotation around it. So what we've tried to do is make it a little bit more fun and make it so it's more in the forefront and how important it really is. So what we also have discovered is, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit. So as you mentioned, here's the second reason, pick list. Because you need to be able to understand what the other teams do. Well, here's the interesting thing. Of all the teams that are in the competition, how many teams need a pick list? There's only a few. A lot of teams do it for a pick list and create that great pick list, and they're like 22nd in the list of 50. You think they're going to use that pick list? They might, but then again, they might not. But if you do need a pick list, scouting is really important to understand who can complement your team. Because you have this list of all these attributes that teams need to have to win the game, and maybe you have 8 of the 10. Well, you need to fill those other 2. So you need to find those teams that have those other 2 attributes to round out your whole team. You also want to find teams that match your strategy. Can they do things that match what we want to do as an alliance? So the last one that I think is the most important is strategy. Being able to interactively use the data to modify your strategy every single match. So the key to strategy is know the rules. If you don't know the rules, you're not going to be able to develop a good strategy. Also, from the rules, you develop that strategy, you develop scouting to support your strategy. So all those pieces tie together. Don't try to build a strategy and a scouting system that don't match. If I'm collecting a bunch of data that I don't need, it's pointless. So here you go. Scouting can significantly enhance a good strategy. So I can count a number of times where our drive team has come back to me personally and said, we just won a match that we shouldn't have won. Because I am absolutely a believer in a good alliance strategy can beat good robots. We usually build a pretty good robot, but we also believe that our scouting and our strategy gives us a little bit more of a competitive edge. It also gives you the ability to know what to expect from the rest of your alliance. Who can do what? Also, what to expect from the opposing alliance. What can they do? Because if I know what they do and I know what we can do, we can start building a strategy to say, we need to stop this one thing from happening. We need to enhance this because we're really good at this. We want to make sure to protect that type of advantage. Determine roles. So one of the things that we do from a strategy standpoint is we kind of look at each team and what is that team role going to be for that particular match. The matches that good teams lose are when good teams try to operate all independent of each other. The real good alliances actually use each other's strengths and weaknesses to not expose the weaknesses and to use the strengths and work as an alliance, and you will have success when you do that. The other thing that we find is really good is to understand the timing. How long does it take to do something? Well, I can do a full cycle from ball pickup to ball shoot, and it takes this many seconds. That means I can get 5 cycles. But you know what? The timing is such that we're almost at that 6th cycle. So if we can get protected, maybe we can get one more cycle, one more ball shot in. So understanding the timing of the tasks. The other thing is, a lot of times the end game, and I've seen it time and time again, where maybe it's some kind of climb. So that buzzer goes off, they go over, they climb, and there they sit for 15 seconds. Why did they waste that 15 seconds just hanging there doing nothing? They should have done one more something, maybe scored a little bit more, because if they understood how long it took them to climb, then they could do one more cycle before they did the climb, and it's going to be close, but they still might be able to do it. So understanding the timing makes a big difference to understanding how you should play that strategy. Always look for strengths and weaknesses, both of your team and of the opposition. Capitalize on everything that you see. If you see one weakness on the opposing alliance, expose it. It's just part of that strategy. You really need to be able to do that. And without scouting, you're not going to understand these types of activities. Okay, so what is scouting actually? So there's a lot of different things about scouting. The first thing is do scouting before you go to the competition. Know the teams that are going to be there. Know their history. Go to their web pages. There's all kinds of good information. Interestingly enough, one of the guys on our team, Michael Hill, he did some graphing of year over year of teams. Those teams that are consistently going to world competition and doing well, they do it every single year. Those are the good teams. They are consistently good. They have a good plan, they have a good build, and they usually build a pretty good robot. They also usually have a pretty good drive team. So those combinations of things usually happen pretty consistently year over year. You want to start focusing in on those teams because those are going to be your powerhouse teams at the competitions you go to. We also had two guys on our team several years ago. You could throw a number out and they knew what team that was, the full history about that team. They just got this charge out of understanding what all the teams were and everybody, oh yeah, you know that team XYZ, and everyone looked at each other. I have no idea what that number is. Oh, it's the such and such. So just understanding and knowing those teams and then researching those individual teams. Look at previous competitions. If you go to a week 2 competition, watch the video of the week 1 competition. There's another reason for watching video is it also gives you an opportunity to practice your scouting methodology. And I'll tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, our scouting system was the first time we were going to attempt to try to time things. It takes this long to do this and this long to do this. And guess what game it was? It was that game, 2014, that had that big ball that got passed around. That was an awful year to try to scout. But we wanted to try to understand the timing. So we actually even tried something different. We were going to follow the ball instead of one person watching each robot. And it failed miserably. It was a train wreck. Because the first match that we started to practice scout, it went so fast we couldn't keep up with the scouting. So over the course of the next 3 weeks, we completely rewrote the whole scouting application to do it more traditionally, watching one robot. But it's one of those things where watching video made us understand our methodology was not going to work because we just couldn't keep up. Prepare for the competition. Make sure everybody knows how it works, everybody's expectations. So if you haven't been there, this is great information about previous teams. There's videos on there, so if there's a week 1 competition, go to the Blue Alliance. There's all kinds of great information on every team that's ever existed, every match that's ever been run, who won, there's videos. The Blue Alliance is a fantastic resource for information. They also have an API to extract data out if you actually want to get to the information. And this almost goes without saying, go to Chief Delphi. There are worlds and worlds of information, lots of discussion about scouting methods, scouting sheets, scouting programs, who should do what, how you should do this, what we should scout. Oh, I came up with this neat metric to watch this. It's all kinds of really good stuff. Like I said, there actually is a whole forum dedicated just to scouting. The next thing is pit scouting. And I'm a little mixed about pit scouting. We joke that it's this is everything I wish I could do, right? So I go ask, what can you do? Well, we can do this. We can climb really fast and we can shoot 17 balls and but then the reality is when you go look and watch them in a match, okay, maybe with no defense and with no other robots on the field, you might be able to do that. But reality is, so I've got some recommendations about pit scouting. Ask only those things of data that you're going to use. Don't ask a bunch of questions if you're not going to use the information. It's a waste of your effort and it's a waste of their time. Take pictures. Always take a picture of the robot. Now, what I'll show you on the Fire scouting system is we actually integrate the pictures in so the scouter knows what the robot looks like, because sometimes you can't see the numbers from the field or from the stands. Visual observation. Sometimes just looking at a robot, if it's hooked together with duct tape and baling wire, oh wow, how long is that going to last after a couple of collisions? How the team interacts with one another. Who's working on the robot? Are they always building something or making repairs or in this panic mode? Because sometimes you can understand a lot about how a team works or doesn't work. So if a team is getting back and they're fixing stuff and they're doing it quickly and they're organized, that's a really good thing. That probably means they have a good drive team that communicates well. If they come back and there's just chaos, that says something about the team. So be a little bit more visually observant of what's going on at the pits. Also, if you do talk to them, try to understand their level of knowledge. Do they know the robot? Do they know the game or the strategies, or do they have a strategy in mind? So there's a lot you can get just from visual observation of the team within the pits. So the other thing that we started doing a lot more is watching practice matches. So this year we actually used our scouting application and scouted the practice matches because that gave us a little bit of information before we start. That always seems to be the challenge, is everyone has scouting and you start collecting this data, but nothing really comes alive from the data until about 10 matches in. So you need something to start with. So between the combination of pit scouting and watching for the practice matches, that'll start at least giving you a feel for how should we run some strategies the first couple of times. So what you want to look for is, are there teams that never showed up for a practice match? That says something. That's a pit you want to go visit to figure out what's going on. Are they finishing their build? We never do that, do we?
We're always 100% in the bag.
So, yeah, all the parts are in the bag.
Yeah. That's why I said in the bag. I didn't say complete. I said in the bag.
So the next one is movement and agility. And you can see a lot from here because it's a combination of how good is that robot and how good can they control it. If they're overshooting everything all the time, if they're overturning all the time, then the drive team probably hasn't had enough practice with that robot. It becomes very apparent those teams that have practiced with that robot and there's no wasted movement. And I'll tell you, the epitome of controlling the robot perfectly is if you watch 11-14. Year after year after year, it is precise. There's no wasted movement. They do something, they go someplace else to do something. There's no wasted movement at all. So keep an eye on that movement and agility because it tells you a little bit about how much practice they've had and how well they can control the robot. Having a robot go really, really fast is real interesting, but if you can't control it, it doesn't help much. Game piece manipulation. Is there something they have to pick up? The year of the Frisbees, can you pick up a Frisbee this way? And can you pick it up this way? So how well can they manipulate the game piece? That is huge because if you can't control the game piece, you're not going to do very well. Also, if there's different places to get the game piece from, if I pick it up from here, do I get it handed from a human player? Where do they tend to gravitate towards? So those kinds of things are really important to understand before you even start because that helps with the strategy. If they can't pick it up off the floor, you can't expect that team to pick it up off the floor. Watch the drive team during practice matches. Are they arguing? I've seen it. I've seen downright knockout, drag-out kinds of conversation with the drive team. And people are smiling because they've seen it too. But watch the drive team. Watch the human player. Do they have a human player that does really well at whatever their task is? Sometimes there's teams that have human players that practice and practice and practice, throwing a pool noodle or throwing a ball or whatever. So the human player is an important aspect that a lot of people forget about. Which teams can do what things? They told you what they could do in the pits, but when during the practice match happens, what are they really doing? What are they able to really do? What can they do well? What can they not do so well? Maybe they can do it, but it takes half the match to do it. Yeah, we can pick up balls and throw it in there, but it takes them half the match to pick up one ball. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, you can pick them up, but it's taken way too long. So the other thing that I find is important is watch teams on the practice field. So once the competition has started, there's that practice field. If there is a team that says they do something that you've never seen, and they're going over to the practice field, watch them, because they might be practicing some task that maybe they're trying to see if maybe they couldn't do it on one match, and they're trying to zero something in or dial something in to make it work right. This is especially notorious for things like vision systems. So, okay, the vision system was off a little, so every ball went to the right, or everyone shot over the wall. So keep an eye on the practice field to see what's going on there, because maybe people are dialing in some of those features and functionality. So when you talk about scouting, this is really what people think of is scouting during the qualification matches. And there's a lot of aspects to this. There's the actual data aspect of it, but there's also a huge people component to this. And then there's also a thing that I like to call readiness. You can't just show up and start doing this. You've got to prepare for it. So these are the areas I want to talk about from a qualification match standpoint. So in the data section, so there's always this argument, should we capture quantitative data or qualitative data? Quantitatively, if you're, like I am, a big movie Moneyball, quantitative is the way to go because it speaks for itself. There's no lying with the data that you collect. And I'm a big fan of that. Qualitatively, the struggle I have with qualitative is sometimes you don't get scouters that are able to make the correct decisions. If I have an experienced scouter that can adjust, you see a lot of these scouting sheets that say, drive team ability, 1 to 10. Well, someone that's really experienced might say they're about a 7. There's some things they did wrong because they have an eye for it. You get someone that, near the end of the day where I just need to grab a scouter and get them in here because I ran out of people, and they're going to say, oh, they seem to drive pretty good, 9. So it just kind of all over the map. If you're going to do qualitative data, make sure you're capturing it with people that have an eye for it. Because if you don't, it's not going to be really good to be able to look at that data. Now what we started doing is started putting some qualitative measures in there, and we were really careful how to phrase them, and I'll show you some examples of those, that we could at least count instances of things, that at least it was consistent data collection. Just like with pit scouting, scout only what you need. If you're not going to build strategies around something, don't collect the data because it just creates more work for everybody. It's more data, it's more things that the scouter has to keep track of. Scout data that supports your strategies, and I'll put a little footnote with that one because it's not just your strategy that you're running. You have to be able to scout for other people's strategies and other things that you might not have thought about. So that's one of the things that we really struggle with is trying to understand every possible thing that could happen. So think about the year of the totes. So I'm moving totes. I can move them 1 at a time, or 2 at a time, or 3 at a time, or up to 6 at a time. Well, let's say I have 3 of them. What happens? Well, I can put them on a stack of 1, or I can put them on the floor, or I can put them on a stack of 3. So there's lots of different iterations of things I could do. So to be able to scout that, we need to have a scouting system that supports all those possibilities because we wanted to understand how fast can people move totes, how high can they stack them, how high can they stack a stack of 3 on top of something, all those different iterations. So once again, there's other strategies that people might be running. You just have to start thinking about all those possibilities, and that's the data that you need to collect on how to, because the worst thing that you want to have happen is the scouter watching and something happens and they look at their scouting sheet or they look at their scouting application and say, how do I even log that? Because it's something that's totally off the wall, who knows? And I can tell you, we've done some things that are kind of bizarre, and we just need to be able to have a way to record that. And that's really what this is. Think of all the possible scenarios that could happen. So the other thing is, from a scouting standpoint and even a strategy standpoint, be creative, because there are things that you want to try to figure out that are going to be different than what everybody else is collecting. So in a game that you're shooting a ball, for instance, everybody's going to say, I shot a ball and it either made it or it missed. It's what I like to call an event. Some sort of event happened. This is how many times I was successful. This is how many times I failed. So that's really what the events are. What we have added, because we found that nobody does all 3 of these, we've also added locations. So for those of you that were in the vision one earlier before lunch, there was a comment about before we did vision, we kind of rolled up to a single spot and that's where we shot from. It was consistent because that was our spot. Well, if I start scouting locations, very quickly I can see that team, that's where they always shoot from. Well, guess what all I got to do to defend you is park my robot right here, and now you can't shoot anymore because I know that's where you shoot from. The other thing is by tracking events like I missed a shot, Now what I want to do is I want to drive you to shoot to that spot instead of this spot, because I know you mostly miss from there and you mostly make from here. So there's some really interesting thing you can do with locations. The other thing that we use location for is traffic flow and log jams. There are notorious areas on every single game that everyone tries to drive. The game with the big ball, it was really interesting. Everybody went the same pattern every single time. And if you mapped it all out, it was like a big Z, and it was highly concentrated on those areas. So what we try to do is avoid those areas because that's where all the traffic was all the time, and it makes us be able to move that much quicker. The other thing is, and I already mentioned this, is time. How long does it take to do something? And this is really easy to do with tablet-based scouting or electronic-based scouting, because the scouter says, I started something, and it just finished. So now I can take the time to when they start and when they finished, and you have to use a little bit of wiggle room because it's not going to be perfect. But from an overall comparison standpoint, you can see those teams that climb fast or shoot fast because of these timings that you can put in here. What's really nice about that is now understanding those timings, you can understand cycles, and you can start looking at those strategies again as do one more because it only takes you 6 seconds to climb and you hung there for 10 seconds afterwards. The timing is something that's extremely difficult to do if you're trying to do paper scouting. I have seen paper scouting sheets that say slow, medium, fast. Once again, it's a little subjective. What's fast to someone that's never watched a match before? Wow, that was really quick. Well, that was a whole lot slower than the other ones. And then you start getting into ones that compare 3 seconds to 4 seconds. Who's really faster? Well, when you're observing it, you're not going to see that difference. So those are some areas that we always try to do, the events, the locations, and timings, because we feel that that kind of gives us a competitive edge, because it's some things that other teams don't do. I've seen teams do those individually, but not all three of them. So the people aspect is as important as the data aspect. You got to train the people. Don't try to train at the match. It's a disaster. We've lived it, and we end up doing it every year. There's one person that says, oh, I'll help. Okay, hey, oh yeah, I trained, we watch the video and we train. They sit down, it's like, what is this? What am I supposed to do? So you're trying to train during a match, it's ugly. Don't do that. Make sure your scouters know the rules, because if something happens that they don't understand the rules, it's going to have to be hard for them to understand, why am I scouting this? So make sure your scouters know the rules and know the game itself. This is key. Understand manpower. Jeez, get spastic with my... Sorry. Understand the manpower needs. So we have a team of about 20 students, and you think, I'm in great shape. I only need 6 scouters. 20, that'll be good. Well, take out the drive team. Take out some people working in the pits. Take out the people doing judging. Oh, and then 4 people didn't come to this event. I'm down to like 5 people. Crap, now what do we do? So you need to understand that manpower needs. And I can tell you, this is one of the things that drove us to writing the scouting applications. We have a small team. We need help. So, think of it, the field of dreams, right? We'll build it and they will come. That's what we've done, is we've built an application and we were able to bring on other teams because they want to be able to use our system and we need their manpower. And a lot of times we find teams that are small like ours that don't have the resources to do scouting either. So as a coalition, we can start doing this scouting effort and it's not so crazy chaos. We went to Pittsburgh last year and we had over 60 scouters available to us across all the teams that work with us. I can't tell you what a relief that is, not scrambling around looking for people to scout, because we have those people all available to us. The other thing that we used this past year that was a huge help when you start coordinating across multiple teams is we had a website that was like and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I'll look it up when I go home. If anyone has any questions, ask me. But it's like a volunteer sign-up website. It's a free website, and we basically created 1-hour time slots, and we had people get on the web and sign up. The neat thing was that if you put your mobile number in there, it would text you 15 minutes before you were supposed to scout. So people didn't forget to come to go scout. The other thing is, because we had the number of people available to us, we just had to worry about filling those shifts. We weren't scrambling trying to figure out, wait, who's scouting next hour? Oh, we're good for the next 3 hours because all those shifts are full. Communicate information, especially what the expectations are from the scouters. We need you here 5 minutes before. You're going to scout for an hour, and then someone will replace you. We find having breaks or scouting for an hour, you start scouting more than that, and it starts becoming a little overwhelming. It is just too hard. Make it easy, make it fun. So everybody laughs when I say make it fun because it seems like nobody wants to scout. Well, we've actually kind of made it with the tablets for like a video game, and it seems to be a little bit more fun. The other thing that we started doing a couple years ago is we started making a game for the scouters. At the beginning of every match, the scouter can predict the outcome score of that match. So I can say it's going to be 110 to 76. And whoever gets the closest, both for the red and the blue, gets a point. If you hit it dead on, you get 5 points, because that's pretty unusual that you get it dead on. And whoever ends up having the most points wins a gift card. So it starts becoming a little bit of a game, because on the scouting application, we show the list of who's winning all the time. So it actually started having some other effects that we hadn't counted on, is the scouters started watching which teams were out there now. And guess what the best resource for when we start talking about pick list and strategy? The scouters. Because they're starting to watch the teams more closely because they want to win the gift card. So it's kind of neat that just trying to make it fun actually had another thing that came out of it, is the scouters started becoming more educated. A good team would come on, they'd say, oh, that's a good team, I need to raise my score a little bit because I know that good team does really well. So they start knowing the teams and what their capabilities are. Readiness, I probably don't have to say this, but it's things like make sure you're ready from a facility standpoint. Make sure you've got good seats to be able to see, and this is always a challenge. It's the mad scramble when they open the doors, right? Where can I get a good spot? If you're doing things like electronic scouting, where's power? What are the power requirements you have? Network requirements. And I can tell you historically, we've done everything from stringing network cable all over the bleachers to doing a whole number of things because of that darn Wi-Fi thing that they always throw at us. No Wi-Fi, so we got to come up with other ways to work around that. Make sure your equipment's all in good working order. I get a lot of ribbing from my team because I've got big totes in the back of my car that probably has every piece of electronic equipment ever invented. And it's amazing how many times I've gone out to my car and said, that's okay, we're set, I've got another hub in my car. So, it's, like I said, I get a lot of grief about it, but, it's the old adage, be prepared. Make sure you're ready to go. Make sure you've got more network cable than you need. Make sure you've got extra extension cords and all those kinds of things. Yeah. We've done everything from big batteries to running power cords to a number of things.
Yeah, and if I can just interrupt real quick, because this is something I learned last year. There are fire codes and fire marshals at these things. So some things that Rob and me didn't understand why we couldn't do a few years ago, I understood last year, Buckeye being a volunteer coordinator talking to the facilities people. And
that's a really good point. Yeah. If you're going to run extension cord cable on the floor, bring yellow tape to put it down, or else they're gonna unplug it and wrap it up. You got to make it safe. We always use big, giant yellow. Yeah,
and even some events are now. I guess the fire marshals have come in and told them not to do that. So again, think about power resources if you can't run the big wires.
So just like before, from a manpower standpoint, make sure you've got a scouting coordinator. Having it be anarchy doesn't work. I can tell you that from experience. Make sure you have a strategy coordinator. That's different than the scouting coordinator. Strategy person is going to be focused with the drive team to understand what should we do. They're using the data that's being collected. The scouting coordinator is the person where the scouts are coming to ask questions, or, hey, my tablet just died, what should I do? So you need someone to be able to coordinate that effort. They're also the ones looking at the schedule to see, oh, we need 2 more people at 2 o'clock or whatever. And then we already talked about the schedule, technology support. When something breaks, make sure you have something, or your Bluetooth dies or something, make sure you got someone close by that can fix a problem. The worst thing that happens is you're scouting with a tablet and now you got no way to scout. You miss three matches worth from one of the scouters. That's a bad situation. And once again, communication is important. Make sure everybody knows what they're supposed to do. Okay, scouting methods. So I kind of view scouting being three things: the actual data collection, data storage, and data analysis. Data collection. If I had a nickel for every discussion, paper versus electronic, I'd be a rich man. And there are pros and cons to both of them. Paper is generally pretty easy, but now what do I do with that piece of paper? I got to do something with it. Either I'm going to collate things later differently, or I got to key it into something to be able to use it. I'm not against paper, but we find there are some advantages to doing electronic scouting that you just can't do with paper, and things like locations and timing. It's difficult to implement that with paper. There is a cost to the electronic scouting, but you'd be surprised it's not as bad as you think, and we've actually overcome some of the challenges, and I'll show you the architecture of ours here in just a minute, to get over the Wi-Fi thing. That always seems to be the big hurdle that a lot of people are challenged by. Data storage. Well, a lot of people have that big file folder full of paper, and they go through that night, going through all that paper to try to figure out who should do what. A lot of teams also just key all that paper data into a big spreadsheet. That's one step better. We did this. Our first year was paper exclusively, and by the end of the match, or the end of the championship, we had a big pile of paper, and we didn't know what to do with it. It was just overwhelming. We couldn't make any heads or tails of it. So then at least the second year, we at least keyed it into a spreadsheet that we could at least sort the columns to say, well, I want to find the best shooter, who shot the most, so you could sum things up and at least do some things there. It's not universally wonderful, though, because what if I want to sort in 3 different columns, and then, well, I sort it over here, and then I come over here and I sort it here. Wait, I wanted to see what this was and that. It starts becoming really confusing. So then the last method is to store it in a database. That can be on site or it can be remote. We actually have chosen to do it on off-site database because as the scouters collect, our drive team down in the pit can see everything that they collected because they're feeding the off-site database and I'm retrieving from the off-site database. There's none of this having to run back and forth between the pits and the scouting to say, oh yeah, here's updated information. They can just see it live as it happens. And the last is data analysis. And I've seen people do this. Analyze with all that big pile of paper. And that Friday night is a joyous night for most people. They stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what a pick list should be. And even the spreadsheets, and I'll give you a real world example. This year we got Team 16 to use our application. And I got feedback after the first regional that they used it at. They said they were done with their pick list at 9 o'clock. They used to be up till 1 o'clock in the morning because they were doing spreadsheet based. They would collect with paper and key it in a spreadsheet. So to analyze the spreadsheet took them till about 1 o'clock in the morning. When they used our application that's all analytics based, they were done by 9 o'clock. And it's like, what are we supposed to do with ourselves? They went swimming at the pool and all kinds of things because it was more fun because they weren't, haggard over this giant spreadsheet trying to make heads or tails of it. The key to analytics is making the data in a presentation that you can quickly make a decision. I do a presentation for work where I talk about analytics, and I show a spreadsheet full of data, and I show the graphical representation, and I play the eye chart game, right? So when you go get your eyes tested, which is better, this or this, or this or this? And it's very obvious that you can look at the graph and you can right away pick out that's the highest one and that's the lowest one. If you look at that big page full of numbers, not so much. So graphically, there's a lot of things that you can pick out very quickly and see what I need to do because I can see this data. And there's so much data that you can collect now, sometimes it's overwhelming. I don't remember how many pieces of unique data. It was like, do you remember what the number was? 180 unique pieces of data that we collected from every team, every match. That's an overwhelming amount of data. So, and we didn't use those pieces individually. We used them like, well, let me give you a good example. So one of the metrics we came up with the tote game was seconds per tote. How long does it take you to move one tote from point A to stacked? Now, if you moved 3 totes at a time, we took that number, divided it by 3, because you moved 3 totes. So effectively, you moved it 3 times as fast. I had a discussion with another team that was able to move 6 totes at a time. And we were having kind of an off-the-cuff, and he was really interested in this analytic stuff. And I showed him, I said, look here, you guys can move 6 totes at a time, but you move it better when you move 3 at a time. You're faster when you move 3 at a time. And you'd think I'd stolen his baby from him, because it was more emotional to him to be able to move 6 at a time. I said, you're going to be better off if you move 3 at a time because you can move faster. And guess what? They went to finals and lost because they moved 6 at a time. And they lost by a close margin. If they would have gone 3 at a time, they might have been able to win. So the analytics don't lie. You know, the first couple of matches, you kind of have to let the data settle out a bit, but by near the end, it starts settling out to very consistent patterns, and you can see things like this. So those are the kinds of things you want to be able to see with the analytics, and that's the stuff that you're really trying to prove, because that's how you can change your strategy to be better. Yes?
So are you doing the analytics live?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so you mentioned that the drive team can see data, so are they seeing the analytics in the pit?
Yep, yes they are. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. So, the system, actually, how about right now? Good setup, by the way. So the innovators started this venture we're on our 5th year of doing some type of electronic scouting. Now, a question came up in the other meeting as far as what is the combination of mentor versus student? We have ranged everywhere from 50-50 to the year before last, it was entirely student written. I was the mentor still, but I just kind of directed traffic, and I like to ask a lot of those questions like, what if we did this, or how about this, or what do you think about this? And the students wrote the thing completely. Now, we've had a little bit of a manpower issue. Last year I cranked out some code, and Ian, who's now a mentor, he was a senior last year, he wrote all the user interface for the tablet. So it's been a mix depending on what type of manpower we have. And here's my plug for, if anyone is of interest to be part of this, we had 9 teams last year. No, we had 13 teams, 9 events, and we ended up having data for over 300 unique teams in the system. It was really pretty cool being able to collect all that data. So what actually is it here? So it's a real-time, it's web-based electronic scouting system. The reason we chose to do it web-based is we didn't want to lock anybody into a specific type of device. Now, I realize now that there are some programming tools out there to be able to do cross-platform. We just haven't got there. We just do everything HTML5 based. So if you have something like a tablet running Android or iPad or a computer or anything, it'll work because it's a web-based device. We have built-in security. So the point of being able to share this out is interesting, but we don't want people throwing a bunch of crap into our database or else it's going to be bad. So we have security built around the pushing in of the data, but it also has APIs to be able to get data out, which are open APIs. We do pit scouting with pictures. And the pit scouting is very dynamic. If people say, oh, we also want these 3 other things, it's very easy to add those things in. Easy to use tablet data collection. We have it kind of like a game. where when you hold the tablet, there's buttons down the side, and you use your thumbs and you just collect the buttons. It's pretty easy to do. I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. It does both quantitative and qualitative data collection. And like I said, we put some boundaries around the qualitative to at least be able to collect in a consistent manner. We have an analysis dashboard for match evaluation. I'm coming into this match. These are the 6 teams that are going to be in that match. What is that match going to look like? And we also have competition evaluation. Here's all the teams ranked by shooting percentage as an example. We have a pick list assistant program. What we determined was the pick list, what most people want to do is, I put in a series of attributes because that's what I need for my team, that's what I need on my alliance. So that's exactly what you do. You put in a bunch of attributes and say, these are the things I need. It goes into the database, finds all those teams that meet those attributes, and gives you a sorted list based on who best meets those attributes. And then we also have admin functionality. We put things in there like, what's the current tablet power in every tablet that's running? So someone administratively can go look at all 6 tablets to find out, oh, that one's getting really low on power. We need to go swap it out before it dies. So that's kind of what the system does itself. So this is kind of an overall architecture. We have a device, anything with a browser running HTML5. We do have a couple of limitations specific to screen resolution. Doing it on a phone is just too small. Someone mentioned earlier, I'm 50 years old. If I can't see it, we're not doing it. It's all run in HTML5. It's written with AngularJS, and it makes AJAX calls to a web server that has a REST API, web API running on it. And so all of our calls are either write calls or read calls into that web API. That web API then is reading and writing data to the database server. We currently run SQL Server. I'm a Microsoft guy. That's what I know. It's easier for me because if I'm going to help, I need something that I know. So we can do a lot of really interesting stuff. So we've got some built-in stored procedures that run in the background to aggregate data and to rearrange data. Because what's happening is we also collect defensive information. So you're collecting defense and you're collecting shooting. I need to be able to match that data up to say, this is the percentage shooting while defended and while undefended. So I can see, should I even defend that robot because the percentages are the same. If there's a dramatic difference, then we need to defend that robot. So there's some really interesting things you do, but that's what's all happening on the back end here when it's aggregating the data and presenting it back through the reading API. And the only reason this is here is because this is all secure. So you can only push data up through a secure channel. So yes?
Sorry, I had another question. So do you have like some kind of checks on the data? Is, you know, like
Yep.
You're not going to stack 8 codes.
Correct.
Something like that.
Yep.
So is that
There's a lot of that built into the system. The other thing that we started a couple years ago, and we came up with some crazy acronym because we were messing around one day. Imagine that, we had time to mess around. So we actually can infer data as well. So if something happened where that's the only option and maybe it didn't get logged, we can infer that data because we know that's the conditions that had to make that happen.
Okay.
You know, if I shot a ball but didn't pick one up, well, I know I had to pick one up at some point.
Okay.
Even from this year, actually, we even made it such that you couldn't shoot a ball unless you picked one up. So the buttons start turning on and off depending on, I picked up a ball, now I can't pick up another one until I do something with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then the best method is to try to catch that stuff as early as possible, because if you're trying to deal with it downstream, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge.
Right.
So this seems really crazy, but we had to get to the outside world because that's where our cloud servers are. So we have these tablets. Well, we can't talk Wi-Fi, but we can talk Bluetooth. So what we did is we took a Raspberry Pi, put a Bluetooth USB stick in it, and now we can talk from the Raspberry Pi, or from the tablet to the Raspberry Pi via Bluetooth. There's a Bluetooth specification called PAN, Personal Area Network. It works just like Wi-Fi would. Matter of fact, to the tablet, it just sees it as a network. It doesn't know the actual media that it's going across. It's sitting on top of PAN. So this Raspberry Pi, we found some code that actually had the Raspberry Pi work like a router. So this is really our Bluetooth router. So this router then has an Ethernet connection to a real router that has a 4G stick in it. So now we can get to the outside world. So it goes from the tablet to the Pi to the router to the stick. So now the tablet thinks it's on the internet. It doesn't know. So now, from a programming standpoint, it's just as if you're on the internet. So it makes it really easy. And the key here is this Raspberry Pi. Now, this is not universally perfect. Sometimes there's a little bit of issues trying to get things to initially pair. But it seemed like once things were paired, it worked really well. And most of the data we have is transactional data, so there's short little blips of data, really small little packets, so we don't have issues. We also built some redundancy code, almost like a queue, on the front-end software, so if the network were to shut down and it didn't receive the message back from the server that says the data was written successfully, it would build this queue up, and it would keep trying to write that data. As soon as the link would back up, it would start writing these and would fire all that whole queue out. So we can queue the data here. There's local storage here that we can queue that data up, and it actually worked out pretty well. So from the 4G, obviously we can get to the cloud, the internet, and we can talk to our web-based server. And then here's our drive team over here, and they have some kind of 4G, either a 4G tablet, or we do the same thing on that side with Bluetooth to 4G in the pit. So now they can get to the data as well as it's being accumulated. So the whole thing ends up being real-time, soft real-time, so they'd be able to get to the data. Yes?
Have you run into problems with the 4G being able to work in certain areas or not work?
Yeah, so we've been to some regionals, and it seems like our team always wants to go into a new regional, and we're doing them this year, going to Chicago. Let's go to a new regional. It's like, okay, we don't know what the venue is. I don't know what the Verizon signal is going to be there. And I try to do my homework the best I can. But yeah, we have had some issues, which is the other reason we like to keep these pieces separately. Because this router with that 4G stick, if we can walk around the building and find a place that, okay, right by these windows, we get a good signal. Now all I got to do is run a really long Ethernet cable to where this is. And now I've kind of solved that problem. So yeah, we have had those issues. Now, the other thing that I've discovered this year is they actually make a true, real, honest-to-goodness Bluetooth router to replace this whole thing right here. Now, they're unbelievably expensive, but what I did is I have found on eBay that they're available because people don't know what they are. I just bought one this year and it was $50. To buy it is like $700. So you can find them on eBay, and like I said, it is a rock-solid connection, and you don't have to mess around with this Raspberry Pi situation.
Can you, link, I'm thinking here, with the Raspberry Pi to your modem, you stretch an Ethernet cable. Could you have other Raspberry Pis in between that would link your Bluetooth signal?
We actually used 2 Raspberry Pis here because we had more than 7 tablets. Bluetooth being, the PAN is 7 devices per Bluetooth stick. So we ended up doing 2 Raspberry Pis into this. We actually had just a switch in between here and here.
I was just thinking about this, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. This gentleman commented on the fire codes and so forth. You may have a problem stretching your Ethernet.
Yeah, and that's always something we're always cognizant of is where can we even go with this? We used to do Bluetooth on the individual tablets, but we found that was even worse and it's a whole lot more expensive. You can get a 4G stick. You can buy one on eBay for like $30. And then what I do is I just add it to my family plan. It's like $10 a month, and I just turn it on for 3 months and then turn it off. It's really a cheap way to go. And this is a Cradlepoint router, and it has a USB plug-in that's designed for a 4G stick. And once again, you can buy these things used for under $100. So all the pieces are pretty cost-effective. Probably the biggest expense is tablets. We have accumulated tablets. We're up to, I think, 12 now, or 13, in various stages of battery life at this point. But what you got to remember is a tablet will not last all day. That all day, Friday, the tablet's going to die about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you need to be able to have a way to charge or swap out tablets. That's probably the biggest expense right there is the tablet. And you need to buy a lot of tablets. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a tablet that you found best to work?
So,
What
yes
year?
and no. We've kind of zeroed. Originally we had Motorola tablets because they did 4G and we could get them directly from Verizon. Well, we don't use the 4G on those anymore, and we've kind of switched over to using Samsung tablets. I know Lenovo stopped making a certain tablet about a year or two ago, and they were just flooding the market. They were cheap. We talked to Team 16. They bought a bunch of those, and they were like $100 a tablet. They were really cheap. So you can find the deals out there. As long as they do Bluetooth, you can do this type of scenario. And as long as the screen resolution is good enough. Some of them have really low screen resolution, and some of them don't have great battery life. Like some of the no-name ones, the battery's not going to last really long. I would at least go with something that's got a name brand, whether it's a Dell or Lenovo or Samsung or something like that. Okay? So what I want to do next is just kind of give you a kind of a whirlwind tour of the FIRES application. And I'll give everybody the URL. You're welcome to get in there and look. You can actually run this. So there's a login button at the top right-hand corner. And when you choose that login button, you'll see here that there's one called Guest Access. If you do Guest Access, that'll get you in. There's only one regional available. And then you just got to put in something here for the name of the scouter. So so we have the ability to scout, look at the dashboard analytics, and then there is the pick list, the admin console, and pit scouting. So we have end-to-end all the pieces that we need to go to a regional. I'm going to just zero in on a couple of things here, the scouting part for starters. The key to making the scouting work really well is to try to automate as much as you possibly can do. The less scouters have to think about it, the less mistakes you're going to see. So basically, they're going to pick, I'm going to scout batch 7, and it's the Red Alliance. Well, look at that. It already populates. These are the teams that are on the Red Alliance. We pre-populate the data from the FIRST API. So we have all the data in there that FIRST has. We don't rely on it real time because we don't want to have to, but we pre-populate the data from the FIRST API. So then I'm going to pick a team. And this past year was a little bit of a challenge because we wanted to understand how people crossed over those barriers. I'm straining to call them ducks. We call them ducks because we're calling defense, and we didn't know, were you talking about somebody defending somebody or crossing over defense? So officially, these in our organization were called ducks. So we had to understand which pieces were where, because we don't want the scouter to keep having to say they crossed this particular type of defense. So what we did is we pre-populated those, and then we showed them back to the scouter during the actual scouting thing. So in order to populate them, you just click on it and say, this is the thing that was there. You can see they're color-coded, so I have one of each color. So what this is, and I'll do this side too. I'm not happy if I do two of the same thing. So a couple of pre-questions here. Do they start with a boulder? Because we kind of need to understand the initial state that they're starting. And then here's where, we don't have any points yet, but this is where they would see that list of who's winning the competition so far. And here's where I select what I think the score is going to be. So when you start the match, what you're going to see is an overview of what it looks like. And these are all based on what they selected earlier, so I don't have to make the choice of this is what I'm selecting. Now, what you see here is we wanted to be able to time how long does it take to cross those various different defenses. So the defense crossing was from the time I start to the time I end. So there's really two things I got to do every time they cross. It's already switched me into teleop mode because I timed out. We have an automatic rollover from autonomous to teleop because we're tracking the data. Did I do it in autonomous mode or teleop mode? So in order to cross, if my robot is right here, to cross, I select this item, and you see there's an arrow there that's half selected on the green. Well, I have a lot of things that can happen there. If I failed the cross, I click on the same side, and now there's a little red line there that says I failed that cross. Eventually it goes away. If I successfully cross, I do that. From the point that I started the cross to the point I ended the cross is how long it took. Now some of them were really quick, and those aren't the ones we really cared about. The ones we cared about are the ones that took 5 to 10 seconds. I started doing it, and I got that door just right, and I finally got through. So we're trying to time that event. Things like, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is I'm right here, see there's a location there? I'm tracking a location of something. Since I don't have a ball, I can pick one up. Once I have a ball, I'm selecting a location here. You can see I can't pick up another one because I already have one. But then I can either score high or miss, let's say I score high. So these are the kinds of things that we're doing. So we're tracking all those locations of every event that happens. And I'll show you why that's important here in just a second. I'm running over here. I'll probably be done in about 5 minutes. You okay for another 5? Okay. So let me go ahead and we also have things like the scaling. So if I'm starting a scale, so it's in the process of scaling. What happens? I can either finish scaling or maybe I fell off. So if I'm fully scaled now, I'm done because the robot really can't do anything else once it's scaled in this particular game. So I end the match. Yes, I really want to end the match. So these are the kinds of things I was talking about that are more qualitative. So did they act primarily as a role as a shooter? Or were they a defender? Or did they feed balls to the shooter? So these are more about the roles. One of the ones that was really interesting here is the robot crosses from the courtyard first to make the cross back easier. This is the one where you go through backwards, you flip the door, and you turn around and you go back through. We wanted to see who did that. So it's really hard to get consistent, so we just made an item here and you just check the checkbox. And now I can say how many times did that particular robot do that particular event. It's a qualitative type of data, but we can put it here so it's consistent.
So if you check that box, then does it come up with a follow-up question?
No, it's just a count. It's just a count that comes up that we will see over on the other side when we look at the analytics. We can see how many teams did this and how many times each team did it.
All right.
Or how many times the scouter logged it. Maybe I should say it that way. Yes?
You kind of add other questions after, like a tournament?
Yeah, so
new attributes?
this is a dynamic list that we add and take things away based on what we see and what we want to collect. Or if another team is working with us and they say, we also need this, we can add it in really quickly here because the way that we've structured this data is dynamic. And then the other thing that is really good here is we have Auton and teleop notes. There's nothing, our drive team uses this stuff a lot because there's just things you just can't collect that this is where you can fill in those blanks. Okay, let me switch over to the dashboard side, the analytics side. So if you're going to get in here, you can just press this dashboard access and that'll jump you right to the dashboard. And these are all the things that we've collected data from. I'll just go to like the Newton Championship and I'll select just a match here. I'll select like match 10. You can see once again it populates the teams for match 10. And the neat thing here is you can play what if games. You can say, I want to create an arbitrary alliance. You can see how there's drop downs on all these teams. I can make any team combination that I want, even if it's not really an alliance. So if I want to like, what is it going to look like if I have a pick list that includes these 3 teams? What is that going to look like? And this is what then grabs the data from the server. We do this because we don't want to interact. We want to be able to switch really quickly amongst these different tabs. So we sync the data, get them all at once. So oddly enough, the menu is kind of here in the middle. So here's like the autonomous information. So these are the different teams that are here. This is what they've done. This is more table kind of data. And we've color-coded these to red, green, and yellow, depending on ranking within the different teams. So then you can look at like match scoring. So here's how this particular team scored in autonomous and teleop. The different colors denote how they scored. So this is where this thing really starts coming alive. This is what you can do with electronic scouting that you can't do with paper scouting. So if I want to see where this team picks up balls from in teleop, that's where they pick them up from. So it all has to do with the locations as I've been recording them during the scouting. So you can start seeing, this is really interesting right here because this is defendable. So you can start seeing, are there teams that are picking up from that zone because they're allowed to, but if I touch them there, it's a foul on them. So that's defendable. So these are the areas that you're looking for because that's really a tough thing to, if I block that, I can really impede their scoring because this is really fast to grab this and come up and shoot, and it's really quick. If I can stop this, now they have to come all the way here to pick up balls. So these are the kinds of things where scouting starts being used for strategy to say, that's how I have to defend if I want them to start scoring a little slower. Okay? And you can see here I got, just like I talked about before, if I want to see where they shoot high from, that's where, and if I just want to see one of the teams, where does this one team shoot high from? Well, you can see that there's a sweet spot right here. What about where they miss from? So I want to see where they miss shots from. You can see that's a little different spot. So from a defense standpoint, I want to start forcing them to the outsides because their sweet spot for shooting was right here. See how this is starting to really work for strategy? It's not just about a pick list. And then we have things like team overviews. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the all team charts. So here is like all auton crosses. So these are all the teams ranked by how many times they've crossed in autonomous. So this is just looking at the whole field across the whole competition.
Can you adjust it for how many times they've competed thus far? Because in the middle of a competition, that number varies.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of statistics that are per match statistics. So if they missed a match, it's not skewed. The other thing that we want to do is those teams that run an extra match because they have to fill out the field. I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head. But we do a lot of per match stuff too. Some other things we look at is like cycle time, and then cycle time while being defended. So I can see if the defense slows down cycle. The last thing I'm going to show you is like this all team data. So this was an ask for a couple of years, and we kept saying just use the application. So this year we finally conceded and said, okay, we'll give you an all team data, and you can see here there's save the table to a CSV file and email it to me. So if somebody wants this in Excel, what this will do is it'll take all this data that we've used and it'll send it to you via email as a big giant CSV file that you can pull into Excel and do whatever you want with it. So all of these different pieces of functionality are built into the application itself. Yeah?
Pull up the data just to show how much we collect and how much is condensed into these graphs to make it easier to read. Because if you were to take the CSV on your own and try to use that, we tell you what everything means, but there is just so much data in there that if you try to build the charts yourself, it's going to take forever. Because if you see the scroll bar at the bottom, that's how many different fields we have, because we have everything on every different defense that you can cross, how fast you cross it, how many times you crossed it.
And crossing this way and crossing this way.
What are you using for your analytics engine?
We actually have written this. This is not even a report writer. This is all hard-coded. Now, we use a tool, High Charts. No, we've changed from High Charts.
We've got a couple different charting libraries and table libraries. The main charting library is Canvas.js. It's just a web charting thing that's quite dynamic and works well with what we've burned this with. And then for charting with this, we had to use a special chart so that we could actually show all the data in one chart. I forget what that was called.
Chart.js.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that's the heat map JS, so it does that location-based stuff. And it does, all you do is you feed it XY coordinates and a whole bunch of stuff, and it builds that. It's just so much simpler. And then, so this is what I was talking about from a pick list standpoint. This is basically the attributes. I want to find teams that match these attributes. So you basically go through here and pick the things that you want. I need them to be able to cross this thing. I need them to be able to do something in autonomous. I need them to be able to shoot at least 80%, blah, 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 blah. And then what it does is it finds every team that matches these criteria. Actually, it finds every team that meets 50% of these criteria, and then it ranks them in the highest to lowest that meets all the criteria. The neat thing is here, I don't know, see, I'm going to scroll a little bit further down here. What you could do is you can then pick 6 teams that you want to zero in on, and then it'll jump right here. It'll go back to that dashboard with these 6 teams. So you can actually go back and forth between this and the dashboard to get more detail about how each of those teams works. So if I really want to, if I get my pick list down to 3 or 4 of them, I can say, okay, well, show me those 4, go to the dashboard. I'm really going to start doing an intense evaluation of those. Okay. So that's what the FIRE system is. We are always looking for more teams to work with us. Interestingly enough, the second year that we did this all electronic scouting, I called my contact at 10:38 and I said, hey, interested to know if you guys are still interested in doing the scouting with us this year. He goes, oh yeah, it came up during our first conversation. We said, take that off the table. We don't need to because 313A is going to build it and we'll just use what they have. So it's comprehensive. It is. The other thing that we're always looking for is any help that we can get. This year we got lots of input from other teams that were using it because they think of things that we hadn't thought of. It's like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So we'll incorporate a lot of those features in here, like a lot of this pick list functionality and a lot of the pit scouting functionality we added in from other team input. So if anyone's interested, please contact me. I'll throw my email back up here. So please contact me. We're always looking for more teams to work with us. My goal is to have teams not have to worry about scouting because it is an effort. The last 2 years, we've tracked time. This is about 1,000 man-hours worth of effort. So it is a big effort, but it is something that we feel is really important. And it helps us as well as we're trying to help other teams as well. Any other questions?
I think I'd like to take your brain for longer than we have here. So.
I'm all for it. I love this stuff. As you can
Yeah,
tell.
we won the award. What was it? 2013. The
Engineering Inspiration Award.
right, because of this out there at Worlds. So that was pretty neat. Because again, we're sharing this with everybody. I mean, we had the screen right there in the pit. The teams are coming up and talking to us. And I think Rob even had examples where teams were struggling a little bit, and he said, "Well, that's because you shoot better here than there." And they kept shooting. They shot better on the right side than the left. And when they started going to the right side, they started improving.
Who was it? Cyber Blue. Brandon had a discussion with, and he said, "You know what? You guys are getting killed by defense." And they said, "What do you mean? Look at your shooting statistics. They were shooting like 90% undefended and like 40% defended. They were getting killed by getting shot by defense." And they altered their strategy a little bit, and they started shooting better. And it was really interesting. They came back later and said, "Hey, thanks. That really helped." And what people always ask me is, "Aren't you like giving away the secret sauce here when you let everybody do this?" It's like, no, not really, because it's not about the data. It's what you do with the data. How do I use this for strategy? So that to me is our competitive edge when it comes to this, is I've got data, but I can give the data to everybody, and then you make decisions on how you want to use it. And that can be dramatically different based on what you need to do or you need to do or whatever.
And I like it because, I mean, Rob's doing this, for a living. Some real-time examples. I work for GE Aviation. We're monitoring engines to figure out if there's a problem, to get them off wing before there's a problem. because it's a lot cheaper to fix an engine before it breaks than it is after.
Yeah.
And again,
when it's a
safety.
million pieces, it's
Yeah,
really
right,
tough to fix.
and especially safety and stuff like that. Besides, just talking with other things. I mean, there's fuel and carbon, and there's things that we can tell which pilots are more fuel efficient than others, but that becomes a union issue. So not every so not every airline can do that. But just some of those things that we're doing, and I know Rob's doing a lot of neat stuff with Kronos on this very same stuff. So just real life applications that students hopefully can do it. As I said, we've got Josh who's up in Chicago working this information. Josh is also one of the game announcers over in Indiana, and he does some other game announcing. He did Buckeye last year, and I think he's going to do Chicago again this year. So
Great, thank you so much, everybody.
thank you.